Hello, I'm Ben Nichols, an Agile coach working at Santander UK. Good afternoon and welcome back to the conference this afternoon. Along with my colleague Charles Haramoto, we'll guide you through this afternoon's DevOps Clouds conference, where we have an exciting lineup of keynote speakers in this virtual room. Before we start, could I ask that if you have any questions, please use the chat to ask them, and we will answer them at the end of the keynote. I'm pleased to introduce our first special guest, Rashik Parmar, who is an IBM Fellow and Vice President of Technology for Europe. Hello, Rashik. Are you there? How are you?
Yep. Hi, Ben. Yes, I'm good. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We are very grateful and happy to have you with us here today. So Rashik is an IBM Fellow, Vice President responsible for creating and driving IBM's European technical strategy. His focus is on helping clients on their journey to become cognitive enterprise, leveraging cloud, AI and Internet of Things technologies whilst creating a dependable IT platform. Drawing on 36 years of practical experience in IBM, he's uniquely placed in developing strategies that are realistic and whilst providing tangible business impact. He's worked with financial, retail and manufacturing clients on IT transformation projects of all sizes. Rashik was awarded an MBE, Member of the Order of the British Empire, as part of Queen Elizabeth's 90th birthday honours. His contribution to business and innovation. Congratulations, Rashik, on that. That's a big honour for you. This afternoon, then, the topic of Rashik's talk is Unlocking the Transformational Potential of Hybrid Cloud. And it's over to you, Rashik.
Thanks, Ben, and welcome everybody. Delighted to share some perspectives here. And as we think about this whole journey of hybrid cloud, it's about really leveraging that to create the kind of impact that organizations and businesses need. And to explore that, there's a couple of links there to blogs as well. So I've been blogging about leadership in the digital economy for some time. More than welcome to go look at some blogs there. And this is also a personal journey as well. So I think it's a transformation journey for people in society. And the Sunday Sprinkles blog is really looking at in search of the sweetness in life, which is part of this journey as well, I think. But the way I'm going to do this is really look at 7 questions. How does hybrid cloud really enable that transformation? And then as we start to go down that journey, what kind of outcomes can you really expect? What's really possible? And as you go down this journey and you start understanding the outcomes, how do the business models change? Because actually, there's a business model change that really unlocks this. And as we go through that business model change, what kind of work do people do? What does a business look like? What's an enterprise actually look like? And then you're going to start thinking about, okay, that's all great, but where do I place the bets? Where are the technology investments that we need to make? And then on that journey are the things that we should be doing to really cater for and cope with some of the challenges that we have in the broader context. And yes, as I start to think about this journey, the first thing that comes to mind is actually an image from a BBC movie called Dynasties. It's actually a series, and it's done by David Attenborough, and it really looks at life in the jungle, life in the wild. And there's this tremendous image here of a bunch of hyenas attacking a lion. And the reason I bring this picture out is the transformational effect of hybrid cloud is really, it provides an opportunity for startups, for fintechs, for small organizations to behave and behave like large corporates and really attack established institutions. And so the fundamental challenge is, how do you start to use that? Whether you're a fintech, whether you're a big business, you're an emerging business, how do you cope with that? And that image of the hyenas attacking what is the king of the jungle is one that I think comes back to us more and more. And so as you start to think through this, one of the pieces that I've understood is that there are actually 3 fundamental laws of digitization that are taking place. And often we don't really bring these to life. And those 3 laws are really at the heart of how digitization is happening. The first one maybe seems obvious, whatever can be digitized will be. You may think that's obvious, but actually that's an important fundamental point. The fact is that many things in society still can't be digitized. Today, when we turn on the tap, we expect water to flow, but we don't think that behind that water flowing is a whole bunch of digitization that makes that possible. In the same way, when we go to a cash machine, we take money out, we expect that money to be able to come out, or we go and do an electronic transaction with an RFID or whatever, that we expect that to take place. that only takes place because that digitization happened. But what else also happens when we go down this digitization journey is the value of the thing that's being digitized tends to become free. We've seen that in music, we've seen that in videos, we've seen that in books. We're now seeing that in daily life, right? So you think about the notion of how the biggest organization like Uber and so on, they don't have any assets, and yet they start to decimate and really transform business. And the key to this is understanding that data allows that new value to take place. And so if you think about the taxi example, right, very simple example, 10 years ago when we'd phone for a taxi, the person there on the phone would say the taxi is going to arrive in 10 minutes. And you knew at best that was a guess, at worst it was a lie. You didn't know where it was on that journey. And really it was Uber coming along and those kind of organizations that allowed digitization to put the map of the reality there, the traffic patterns and so on, and give you that view. So as you start to think about these are three laws that you need to keep in mind, and they really form the foundation for how we see digitization happening. But as you kind of think through this and say, right, we're actually in a very difficult moment in society because COVID has come along in a very unexpected way. We're seeing digitization continue to transform all aspects of our economy and our life. And there are some big fundamental issues like sustainability that we need to cope with and manage. And so as you think through how that digitization takes place, it's about us understanding there are three fundamental outcomes that we're trying to achieve. The first one is, how do I survive? How do I ensure that I can continue to deliver the value that I need? So how do I leverage the new data that I get from digitization to increase customer intimacy? So when I look at things like what the Standard Bank of India did, they started to reimagine the customer relationship. And the notion of YONO, you only need one thing, means that they simplify the life for a customer. They make it really easy. That's why they're able to get 9 million logons every day. I mean, that kind of simplification and customer intimacy and understanding the issues from the end user perspective is fundamental to this journey. The second part of the journey is simplification, and you look at many of the programs that banks are using, driving around the world. They're using this next wave of hybrid cloud and transformation to really simplify the IT landscape. The IT landscape has become very, very complex. Compliance and regulated compliance becomes a massive issue. And the work that we're doing, Bank of America, using the FSS cloud, for example, really starts to simplify that and provide a unified and consistent way of understanding all aspects of regulation. And that simplification really makes it possible for us to increase the effectiveness of the business and also increase the efficiency of the business. And the last part is they're using this hybrid cloud as a way of really finding things that are unique, finding an outcome that's unique for business, and then just super scaling that. And if you want to see more of that, by the way, on all the slides, I'm sure you get access to all the slides, you'll see links, and those links will go to more details on what I'm talking about. But as you start to think through these and say, okay, now so I get the outcomes, I get this notion that it's a jungle out there and we've got to survive. But what is it? How is the new value created? How is the new business model actually emerge from this? And this is where work that we've done over the last few years kind of brings this to life. And I published it actually in a Harvard Business Review article in 2014. And you might think, well, that's a long time ago, but actually it's interesting that these are still prevalent. And so when you start to think about the transformation, you see that as the banks really in banking systems pervade all aspects of society, these new business models are fueled by new technologies and also provide tremendous new opportunities for institutions, banking institutions like yourselves. And so the notion of taking a physical product and using connectivity, sensors, and so on, augmenting that product with new capabilities, new intelligence, if you like, allows you to change the relationship with that product. And you see that in things like autonomous vehicles. You see that in smart TVs, smart appliances, smart homes, and that whole smarter journeys is really in that space. And so the opportunity to create new services based on the intelligence that you have on those products, and that the transformation of that business model from being a manufacturer to really being a service provider based on the services that you can augment the physical products with is kind of fundamental. The second example, and the second model change is anything that people do is gradually being automated, and that automation really creates completely new ways of interacting and creates new levels of efficiency. And you see that from things like the retailers and the Amazons creating paperless stores, no checkout stores, or you see that in things like HR services, which are being provided as a service on the cloud. So in essence, the processes that are manual today gradually are being automated, and they're being put into the cloud, and the cloud, they're really there as a digital process. And the challenge is who becomes a digital platform that makes that possible. The third pattern that we see is when you take a value chain that spans multiple organizational boundaries, then there's automatic inefficiency in those boundaries. And by bringing the value chain together, by bringing a trusted data source across that value chain, you're able to automate across the value chain and really transform that. And the work that we've done suggests there's probably about $4 trillion a year wasted because of inefficiency between organizational boundaries. Now, the notion of blockchain, and we see that, for example, with trade finance, the work that we're doing with Maersk and other shipping companies and traders, there's each of those processes fraught with challenge because of the paperwork and the underlying disconnects between those processes. But by bringing the trade lanes platform on a blockchain structure, we're able to create a trusted data source, and you start to be able to transform that. Similar with food trust, where we have a chain which helps us understand the provenance of the food and the authenticity of the food and understand all aspects of that, really transforms that. The fourth pattern says that any data that you have in the business can be a tradable asset. And we see that in many, many aspects. So we see that in, for example, weather company sharing the weather data, or we see that in telcos who are taking mobile phone data and understanding where the location and trajectory of that phone really becomes a tradable asset and becomes high resolution traffic data sold to car manufacturers or satellite navigation providers. The final pattern says that anything that you have as a physical thing, by creating a digital representation of that, you can create completely new interaction patterns, you create completely new value. And that's really where things like Airbnb and Uber, as I talked about before, really become the underlying pattern. So this chart kind of gives you a summary, and the paper actually goes into a lot more detail in that. But the notion that each of those models are very simple to get your head around, and you can start to see how, as the business model changes, there's a tremendous new opportunity that emerges. And as you start to think through that opportunity that emerges, you start to say, well, okay, what's really going on here? How is that being made possible? And one of the things that IBM's been doing a lot of is we've built a kind of an understanding of how technology is advancing. And we're actually at a fundamental shift in technology, which is around accelerated discovery. So you can see how science has changed and made that possible. So the empirical science that we had in the proven renaissance area, going through theoretical, computational, and we've just kind of coming through the big data era where we're using machine learning and patterns and so on. We're now at a point where accelerated discovery, really using the hybrid cloud platform, using new levels of automation, using new kinds of ways of really driving the scientific knowledge we have, using AI to help us build those hypotheses, and testing that in the marketplace allows us to create completely new interaction patterns and new business models and new use cases. And so we certainly believe, and IBM Research kind of has a really good view on that. We're at a pivotal point. So we've moved away from the kind of data-driven organization to an AI-driven organization, to one that really is discovery-driven. And that's made possible because of the advances we've had in technology so far. And those advances really fall into three broad buckets, right? There's the use of traditional IT, so use of things like von Neumann structures and traditional programming techniques, which have really helped us. We've also seen the emergence of AI, and how AI really helps us drive down the amount of human intervention and draw insight from the vast amounts of data. Just to give you some metrics there, from an IT perspective, we went past 1 billion transistors to every human alive back in 2012. And today we have something like 40 exabytes, so 10 to the 23 bytes of data out there. And the only way we can make use of that and understand that is using techniques such as fast ingestion and then driving that to 100 times faster using some of the hybrid cloud capabilities that we have. Or we start to use AI and quantum, which is emerging, which allows us to accelerate some of the design processes and some of the kind of idea generation processes that we have. And these really help us start to test new ideas, start to drive that innovation in ways that we hadn't done before. And so the combination of the hybrid cloud, access to AI and quantum and bringing the data together, it's not any one of these is going to make this possible. It's actually the combination that makes this possible. And what that takes us to is that we actually reimagine what people will do in the workplace, right? And it really has to be very carefully considered here, because the emergence of work in the world is people want to progress, people want to be driving new things, and so we see new kind of work coming on. We refer to it as kind of new collar work, and that work is very much outcome led. It's very unpredictable, so we don't know how much demand we have. It's actually difficult to capacity plan people and so on, and it's about creating new business models. So the bulk of the work will be around those, and there will be new working practices, and we'll see more of that as we go forward of using agile techniques, lean startup techniques and so on, being much more data savvy, so being able and comfortable to understand the plethora and complexity of the data we have out there, and starting to use real creativity, so trying to really leverage the insights from people. And you see that in many of the sort of banking examples that we have. So if you look at some of the chatbots that we've built with people like Credit Mutual or NatWest, we've really reimagined the way in which customers interact with the bank and the organization through chat interfaces, which are very natural, right? The creativity that we've driven out of those examples really makes it fascinating. But that's all being made possible because the people working those projects have some new values. They're looking to do things which are meaningful. Right? They're trying to really understand what the customer cares about, understand what the issues the customer has, and start to do things which create real value for the customer. Right? And that's why they're looking at real metrics that matter to them, metrics around helping the customer cope with some of the challenges they've had during the COVID times, coping with some of the underlying issues of deprivation that exists in societies and so on. At the same time, what we're finding more and more is people want to have inclusive teams, and that inclusive team is kind of fundamental to really bringing the breadth of understanding. So when we talk about diversity and inclusion, this isn't a nice to have, it's kind of fundamental to us being able to have the breadth of understanding of the client context and ensuring all those ideas are in our projects so that we create the solutions that really matter to everybody. And so creating inclusive teams is kind of critically important to us. So that gives you a feel for how new work comes about. But then, what does the business look like? What's an enterprise look like? And again, we've given a lot of thought to this. And very recently, the Institute of Business Value published a paper which talks about virtual enterprises. And this really requires a bit of thinking. When we look through how those new patterns and how those new business models change, how we create value and how we deliver value, it's kind of really fundamental to think through what is the enterprise, and the virtual enterprise is one that really has a pervasive boundary. It's not tied to a building or within an organization. It's actually connected through the networks. It really becomes a platform that provides unique value to the value chains that it serves, and those platforms are really market making. They're starting to reimagine what the consumer needs and use that platform to then drive that forward. Underneath that, the organizations are very much science and data led, and they're driving innovation by drawing down insights from the data, drawing down insights and uncovering those insights that make sense. And then they're taking those insights and workflows to create this kind of golden thread of how we create value for the customer. And a big part of that is making sure that you really understand what the customer needs. And the notion we see here is it's finding the things that really solve the friction that exists in society it's what exists for the individual. It's about understanding that this person, when they're buying this house, buying this product, needing this financial service, they need it in this kind of way. And understanding their context, using that data to understand their context and making it meaningful but not creepy. And that's a kind of fine balance. And what we're seeing through this innovation is really leveraging that. So let me give you an example. So when we look at using the breadth of data we have from social media, today it's very easy to use kind of 300 words of that, and you can start to understand the psychometric profile for an individual. That psychometric profile gives you a very clear understanding of the needs and wants and the language that would appeal to that person. You can also start to use some of the AI to understand their full context and make a much more considered proposal to them and make that meaningful. And that's really what this is about. The workflows need to have that AI insight infused in them. At the same time, there are some fundamental issues that we have to worry about. So it's making sure that what we derive is sustainable and has enduring impact. And people are very much aligned to the kind of environmental and social and societal aspects of what they're doing. And so the virtual enterprise has to have that kind of notion as central to what they're doing. At the same time, there needs to be this very, real seamless interaction between human and technology. And that kind of seamless, empowered experiences is what this is about. And it's not just technology for the customer, it's also technology for the employee. How do we liberate that employee and remove some of the routine drudgery that they have and make it possible for them to be creative, to be able to reimagine their role and constantly innovate what they're doing. And that's all built on this open, secure, hybrid network. Now, bear in mind that these systems are tremendously vulnerable because you've got so many perpetrators trying to get to them, right? And so you've got to build this on a kind of zero trust platform. You've got to have all the security mechanisms, and it's a kind of arms race between the cloud provider and the perpetrators, and we're trying to stay one step ahead. So leveraging that kind of open, secure, dependable, platform is key. And that's why you see a lot of our work going on things like confidential computing and some of those kind of techniques which help us kind of stay one step ahead of those perpetrators. So this these building blocks really provide the framework for a virtual enterprise. And as you start to think through this and say, okay, that makes sense, but how do we as IT professionals help make that possible? And this is really where we took insights from 100 CTOs. So over the last year, we interviewed 100 CTOs across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And we were asking a range of questions from, where are you placing your technology decisions? How are you thinking about the IT architectures that will serve the business going forward? How are you imagining the value that you're going to deliver to the business? And we were actually quite cheeky in there. We asked things like, what decisions were you really able to make? What decision do you regret making? Do you have the authority and ability to drive those decisions? And the insights were fascinating. And what came from that was this really simple framework we saw of most CTOs are starting and really driving the hybrid multi-cloud. They recognize that one cloud doesn't serve all the needs. So they need to have that multiple hybrid platform. They need to have that ability to it's not about workload movement. It's about being able to integrate across those layers, right? And it's about being able to have choice with consistency across those. And that choice and consistency really comes from this notion of microservices and containers together. So microservices really becomes a developer view of how we manage those, those concerns and the needs of the users and the way we provide the function. At the same time, containers provides a way of automating and simplify the automation and really driving down the efficiency and effectiveness of how we keep that service running. So those two things kind of come together as a platform, which then opens up the way of creating this new layer which we refer to as cloud services integration. The CTO is really looking at how do I isolate myself from the ways in which the service is provided, whether it's provided by a SaaS offering on the cloud, or whether it's something that my team have built and run by themselves, whatever, but keep that consistent layer. And at the same time, they want to be able to infuse insights, so be able to walk up that AI ladder, bring together all the data that they have in the business and available to them aside the business, be able to use and create the right kind of models, draw the insight, and make that insight available in the right way to be able to build those intelligent workflows. And so at the top end, they really want to build intelligent workflows that cope with the broadest set of demands, create the productivity for the business, create the performance of the employees so they can drive that forward, and also start to increase the predictability of the business outcomes. And then two big elements along the side is how do we automate all the aspects of operations, creating the observability platform so we can see this as a unified, well understood IT landscape, and be able to run that and cope with all the challenges we have along that, and then also manage the security and privacy. So not just managing the perpetrators, but also ensuring that we're delivering on the regulatory needs of coping with GDPR or the prevalent data protection rules, preparing for Gaia X and all those kind of things. So this is the kind of overall 7 key decisions I would say that CTOs are making. But what came out of that was some other pieces which was fascinating, and what we saw was CTOs had a set of anxieties that they struggled to put words to, and they were saying things like, am I doing enough to reduce the carbon footprint of my data centers? Am I doing enough to ensure that I'm being sustainable in the way I'm using my infrastructure? As I create my code, is it really secure and dependable? Are there unintended consequences from the way we're using the data? Is the AI that we have really explainable? Are the systems really inclusive, and do they have some unintended bias in there? Have we got the right kind of responsible impact? And so from those insights, what we've created here is a framework, and this framework we refer to as responsible computing. We believe that most IT professionals and IT organizations want to be a responsible computing provider for the users, the employees, the colleagues, etc., that they serve. And what we're trying to do with this framework is to really define this in a way which is understandable, implementable, and really steps up the professionalism of the IT industry. And this for me is a fascinating piece. So as we think about the transformation from a hybrid cloud provider to the enabler of new kind of business outcomes, this is the kind of framework that we have. So help those 7 questions and how we've been through this kind of notion of how IT can really be the transformational engine for the business and really help organizations become that hybrid virtual enterprise that pervades the value chain and becomes a platform that we depend on and really serves the needs of the society. So with that, I'm going to close and I'm going to open up some questions. So Ben, do we want to have some questions here?
Hi, Rashik. I'm not seeing any questions coming through at the moment. I found that really, really interesting. So thank you very much for that. Great presentation, really insightful. I was wondering, what do you see as the kind of some of the biggest barriers to the adoption of hybrid cloud, especially in organizations where there's kind of a large amount of legacy or old technology in play?
Yeah, I think one of the barriers is that when we look at legacy technology, there's an assumption that legacy technology can't play in the hybrid cloud, but actually has a role to play. There's no reasons why we can't adopt the DevOps principles, why we can't do CI/CD pipelines. They're all possible. But a part of this is also our understanding of those systems is limited. So we've got to be able to really understand what's in the systems, the code and systems that sit there, and then bring that and start to build a sensible journey for evolution into microservices. And that's more and more possible. Part of the things that we've been doing is creating, using the Kubernetes platform, a hybrid multi-cloud that spans both the mainframe and traditional Unix systems, as well as cloud providers. So you've got a unified development environment, unified runtime. And that gives you quite a lot of capabilities there. And so how we expose some of those traditional capabilities into the hybrid cloud is one of the challenges, but there are solutions and ways we're driving that forward.
Great, thank you. Good answer. I don't see any questions here at the moment. So Rashik, thank you very much. That was very helpful and insightful. And thank you very much and congratulations on your keynote talk.
And Ben, so if people want to continue the conversation, we are in the private room, so I'm going to be there in the private room. I'm more than happy to take questions or have one-on-one conversation with colleagues, because there's a whole bunch. I mean, there's a ton of examples that I couldn't cover because it's a very limited time, and there may be things that people want to probe into. I'm more than happy to do that.
Great, thank you very much, Rashik. We'll now have a video. I think we'll play until the next keynote speaker. Thank you.
I think the video should start soon. There is a little bit more delay than this afternoon. So I'm looking at the platform right now, just to see if everything is okay. I think so.